Hi, I'm Mike Dilk and you're listening to the Relax Back UK show, the show that explores all kinds of health topics relevant to you, your family and your friends. Each week I talk to expert guests from a range of backgrounds to inform and entertain you. So please do join the Relax Back UK family and stay tuned.
Hi, and thank you for joining me on the Relax Back UK show. This week, something to consider when thinking about your summer holiday.
Sunscreens are actually often harbouring quite toxic chemicals. Not for us, they've been checked and regulated to make sure they're safe for humans, but for many organisms. And in particular, it's quite evident, and there's quite a lot of science which has come out of it, of the toxicity associated with coral reefs.
Professor Michael Sweet from the University of Derby has been looking at the effect of sunscreen on coral reefs and has some suggestions to mitigate it. Then, we're a nation of animal lovers, especially dogs. Or are we?
Edinburgh University have stipulated dogs bred in low welfare conditions on puppy farms have a 70% more chance of being aggressive towards people and other dogs.
Animal advocate Paul Watkinson shares some pretty worrying information on this and gives us all some action we can do to help prevent animal cruelty. So please do stay tuned for a great show. Thank you.
This show is cool!
So the first topic is about the use of sun cream and coral reefs. So I asked Professor Michael Sweet, what is the connection between those two things?
So obviously, I'm sure many of your listeners have been swimming in the lovely tropics, and you're lathering up your sunscreen. The slip, slap, slop analogy of making sure you're protected still holds true. So everybody should be putting on sunscreen or at the least covering up, obviously, when you're out in the sun. And in fact, even only 10 minutes of walking in the sun without sunscreen starts to cause sun damage to your skin. So it really is important to actually cover up or put those sunscreens on. But few people actually really understand that the sunscreens are actually often harboring quite toxic chemicals. Not for us, they've been checked and regulated to make sure they're safe for humans, but for many organisms. And in particular, it's quite evident, and there's quite a lot of science which has come out of it, of the toxicity associated with coral reefs. And obviously there's that link between many tourists and quite high numbers in those lovely tropical seas all bathing together. And you actually see a film of oil type structure on the surface, and most people would just ignore it, but that's going to be dissipated into the ocean and start impacting all the organisms which are found on reefs particularly.
Okay, so this is proven to actually happen in the wild, if you like. It's not a case of sort of doing some work in the lab and getting a bit of coral and chucking a load of sunscreen on it in the lab where conditions are very different and going, oh my goodness, this isn't good for it. This is actually proven to be the case in the field.
Yeah, so it's a bit of both. For sure, most of the research has been undertaken in controlled conditions. What you try and do as a scientist then is mimic what you find in the environment. And that has been a challenge to try and actually get that true environmental or toxic concentration that is present in these locations.
Because, I mean, there'd be massive dilution, there'd be waves to break it all up. There's all kinds of natural factors going on there, I would have thought.
Yeah, and what's quite important here is you've got to remember it's a sort of compounding effect. So you've got a buildup of different stresses all affecting reefs. So the main stressor, which we're facing at the moment, is climate change, and we need to tackle our carbon footprint. That should be going without saying, but obviously still needs to be said in many cases, because there's a few people out there who still don't necessarily believe in it. And then what you get, so if you have these global stresses, then you have these local stresses. So the local stresses are things like land reclamation, sewage outflow, and then sunscreens is what I would always say a sort of drop in the ocean. As you say, it gets highly diluted, it gets broken down, but it's something that you can actually change overnight. You can change people's mentality and understanding of that, and it's something that we can use as an educational tool, as well as actually getting people more aware of the issues we face. That's the way I see it, and that's how we got involved in this.
So what is it that tends to be in the sunscreen that causes damage, and what does it do to the living coral in the terms of the layman?
Yeah, so the main thing they do, or the main thing they've been shown to do, is disrupt reproductive cycles, create actually DNA damage, overall weakening the coral's resilience in the face of these more climate shifts, and actually induce what's called coral bleaching, which is the loss of the symbiotic algae. And it's key chemicals like oxybenzone, which have been known and shown to be toxic to invertebrates. And it's not just corals as well. It's many different invertebrates. So it also impacts invertebrates in freshwater systems as well as the marine. So about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a big change, or quite a big a change, where even countries like Palau and islands like Hawaii started banning certain products or certain chemicals which were present within them. This led to a whole suite of different products being called reef safe, reef friendly. There's little tags on the sunscreen bottles usually, which insinuate that this is the case. But importantly, there was no accreditation, or is still no accreditation, until we've launched Reef Protection Factor. So
okay, that was going to be my main questions actually, and you've sort of answered it already. This Reef Protection Scheme, or stamp, if you like. I mean, I could go ahead and make some sun cream and fill it full of oxybenzene and put RPF on it, and no one could do anything about it, could they?
So so the RPF is now trademarked. We've written a white paper, a scientific paper, which has been accredited and checked by multiple researchers around the world. So that in itself, getting multiple scientists to agree on a standardized approach was a mission right from the onset. There's an old adage: if you get 20 scientists in a room and ask them a question, you'll get 20 different answers, and that's very true.
At least, I think some scientists might give 2 or 3 answers.
Yeah, for sure. And this was something that was quite important to actually iron out right from the onset, and it's taken a lot longer. Well, it's taken the length of time it needs to get this paper or this recipe out. And then that's the beauty of partnershiping with an advertising company like McCann, for example. Everybody's done it non-profit. So the University of Derby, McCann are all non-profit in this regard. And it really is just to drive that change. What RPF now does is people can apply for RPF. There's a website called rpf.world. You can see which brands are accredited, but also importantly, you can see which institutions around the world, non-government organizations, government entities, charities, universities, who are all getting behind this and supporting what I like to call a movement into making this big change.
Have you got any teeth, though? Again, if I make a sunscreen and it's full of oxybenzene and I stick RPF on it, can you do anything about it? I could just thumb my nose at you and go, well, what you going to do, pal?
Well, it is trademarked. So officially, we can take people to court if we so wish. The idea is that to get that print as well, you need to show the open access data. So it needs to be accredited in these labs, which are around the world, and they're tested in this rigorous state to get our badge. Anybody can still put whatever they want, whatever badge they want, the reef friendly or the coral friendly, and that's what they're doing at the moment. But the idea is that this RPF accreditation, either bronze, silver, or gold, gives you that open science aspect as well. So all data gets published, all the information is available, so that people can actually see what really happens for that product. So if you have done this yourself and you've just stolen our RPF logo, then there will be no data associated with it. So if obviously that might happen, or that might be a controversial issue, but by and large, the consumers will hopefully be able to delve a little bit deeper if they wish to find the real evidence behind it.
Okay, let's go back to some of the chemicals that are actually causing some of the issues. So you mentioned oxybenzene, Did you mention another one? Are there other ones?
No, but there's quite a lot. So and what they moved from oxybenzene was then they used things like titanium oxide and zinc oxide, and what they went for is nanoparticles. So nanoparticles are an amazing invention. They're really small particles of whatever you want to use. Silver nanoparticles have been invented, zinc, titanium, like I say. And the power of these nanoparticles is that they have a large surface area to volume ratio, and so they're used in suites of different technologies, including things like organ transplants and stuff like that. That nanotechnology meant that these chemicals, zinc and titanium, become even more toxic. So what we're finding with the testing of the sunscreen is that you want these non-nano particles, and then zinc and titanium actually become much safer. And in fact, actually, with one of the products that we've tested, we actually showed a positive influence on coral growth, which it was unheard of, and so therefore there's a product now which is available which actually shows positive impact on growth, which I just wouldn't believe myself if we hadn't have done the testing.
Okay, that's interesting. Now you mentioned that some of the chemicals that in the older type of sunscreens, or the sunscreens that haven't got your badge on, they're bad for the coral, and they interrupt with their breeding, and they've got hormones that disrupt things, all this kind of thing, which got me to wonder, should we be slapping them on our skin? Can it cause problems for us?
Well, it's a very good question. Unfortunately, I'm not a medical doctor, but from my understanding is obviously the accreditation for a product to be used for human use is actually quite high. So all these chemicals have been tested and checked to make sure they are safe for our human, for humans in general, but for plopping on our skin. And so by and large, consumers should be quite confident in the fact that what they're putting on is safe. But you start to question, like you say.
All right. So moving on to another thought, just how much of this stuff, whether it's got the RPF stamp on it or not, is going into the sea and potentially covering coral reefs?
So the science seems to suggest that it's about tens of thousands of tons, basically. Going back to what we sort of discussed before, it really depends on whether you're the single person on a beach or whether you're in a mass tourist area where there's hundreds of thousands potentially of people all dipping in and out and lavering up the sunscreen. So you can physically see it in many instances of what I've seen, and it depends on the popularity in that case. But if you think about it, obviously the direct application or the direct route of sunscreen to the sea via putting it on your skin and then it washing off is only one way that these chemicals can actually come into the ocean. You go home, you have a nice shower, you're showering off that sunscreen as well. But then also you're probably using a shower gel or shampoo or conditioner, and all these things also have various different toxic chemicals, usually to some degree.
That's interesting, because when I saw this, I thought, how many thousands and thousands of bottles of sun cream has that got to be? It just can't make that much of a difference, because surely there can't be enough sunscreen being used. But actually, moving on to what you're saying, there's a whole range of other ways that these things can get into the sea and cause problems for coral reefs. Do you think that's more of a problem?
Yeah, and this is the whole point of the RPF. So we haven't called it just a sunscreen factor or anything like that. It's based on sunscreens initially, because that's where the interest and the sort of market is. But we've actually just tested a surf wax, for example. So there will be a surf wax from a very reputable brand which will be carrying this logo going forward. And then, we hope to look at even things like mask defogger for scuba divers and shampoo, conditioners, shower gels. All of this can be explored and hopefully improved as well. So we're not just trying to find something which has no impact. Now we know that we can actually make a a potential positive impact. Now, that positive impact, like you say, is similar to the negative. Is it going to be massive? Is it going to really make a big difference? And as we started this conversation, all of this is for naught if you don't tackle your carbon footprint as well. And I'm a big advocate for putting our money where our mouth is and things like that. And so what we do with the profits from the Coral Care sunscreen, which is produced, that's the beneficial sunscreen, that goes into a fellowship program where anybody around the world will be able to apply for funding to really do some new conservation, restoration efforts, but even bioinnovation of new products as well, which have that positive gain. So when I mentioned it's a movement, we really are hoping we're going to change the whole face of how cosmetics really are pushed forward, but then also how the money from big business is pushed back into conservation and restoration in a sort of circular economic model.
Okay. And how's it working? Are you getting buy-in from big business? Because, you know, when you sort of knock on big business's door and say, do you know what? I'm not sure you're doing the right thing. I can't imagine they open you in with, you know, open arms and, oh, yes, come in. Tell us everything we're doing wrong. We'd love to know. I can imagine they might slam the door shut in your face.
Yeah, we're probably going to get a little bit of sort of backpedaling like that. But what we're hoping is that the consumers, like the people on your shows and things like that, will start to make a choice as well. And if people are making that physical choice and moving to this accredited and trustworthy brand, so to speak, then the other companies will start to see that. And indeed, people are in discussion. It's not a straight swap. There obviously is a bit of a sort of cost to them reinventing or redeveloping their formula. But I think the general public, by and large, are actually shifting their mindset into wanting to help the environment. And then if we give them a clearer path in how to do that, and it comes down to that choice again, because we're not saying don't wear sunscreens and all sunscreens are bad. We're providing opportunities and options for people to actually make a hopefully more informed decision and move in that sort of direction.
So have you got any successes that you can tell me about from large manufacturers of sunscreens and cosmetics? Maybe you can't for reasons, but have you got any success stories so far?
Well, so far there's a company called Stream to Sea in America. They have the first two accredited sunscreens. One is the gold accredited one, which we actually helped them develop as well from the onset, and that's called Coral Care. And that has that 29% increase in coral growth when treated in the facilities. And then their standard one has a bronze rating, which means it does no harm. So there wasn't any positive increase, but there also wasn't any death or necrosis or anything along those lines recorded. So a truly reef safe product. We are now launching the sort of testing sites. Bear in mind, we only launched it about a week or so ago to take on people. We also have another testing facility. So the University of Derby is one testing facility. There's the University of Bremen in Germany also is an accredited testing facility. And we're really interested in pushing forward with getting more facilities. The more facilities we get, there's a company in France who's looking into this as well. And what you have to do then when you have all these different accredited facilities is you need to do what's called ring testing, where the same product is sent around to these different institutions or fields, and the same result is validated. Yes, exactly. And that's vitally important.
Interesting. All right. It sounds like it's gaining traction, and it's certainly worthwhile thing to do. If you were, say, the boss, the world boss, what and you're in charge of all this stuff rather than just sort of trying to coax people along, what would your next step be?
The world boss. I like that title.
Yeah.
Can I use that going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. That can be your new title, Professor World Boss.
Well, first of all, I'd get everybody to reduce their carbon footprint. That has to come front and center. I travel around the world quite a lot, and even my dad says, how do you justify that for the work we do? So I work for the United Nations sometimes, obviously through the university and different charities and governments. And so what we also do is we buy land, or I buy land around the UK to reforest and rewild. So I think everybody can do their bit, big or small, with regard to how they change their ways. One of them is obviously driving less, or planting a few trees, or looking into your garden and letting some increase wildlife and increase the biodiversity and so on and so forth. But then you can start to make different choices with what you use. So the sunscreen we've actually produced as well is made from sugarcane, the surface, the packaging, and so that actually sequesters carbon technically as you're holding it or putting it by your towel. So you start to look at these things in slightly different ways and go, right, I need to reduce my plastic waste. I need to think about what chemicals I'm putting on my body. I need to think about what I'm putting down the sink or in your washer at home with the microplastics associated with that. So it's all these things are starting to compound up. And it's all about education as well in my book. So this is why I'm a university lecturer. This is why we've also created a children's book as well, which is linked to climate change, and a little bit of the RPF story has worked its way into that. We're delivering these books to schools around the UK as well. So if any of your listeners are associated with primary or secondary schools and want some free books, give me a shout. And we'll make sure they get out there, and we'll do talks with the kids and things like that. So it's a multifaceted approach to getting people to think about what they're doing, and then hopefully providing options for change.
Okay, right. So two things. If people have been listening to this and think, all right, this Professor Michael Sweet is talking a lot of sense.
The world boss, remember?
Yeah, what Professor World Boss? Trump might be a bit upset about that title, but we'll leave that to one side. We'll park that. He's talking a lot of sense. I would like to find out a little bit more in general, a little bit more about the sunscreen thing, and also, actually, you mentioned this book, the title of the book, and how people can get it. So those three things.
Just reaching out to me at my university. So if you Google Michael Sweet at the University of Derby, you find quite a lot of information about me and various different hats I wear. The website for the Reef Protection Factor is rpf.world. And on that website, it tells you all the different things we've been talking about, including the different supporters of that brand, and then you click on those little logos and that takes you to those supporters and so on and so forth. And there's also a link to the book, but the book is also called Coral Rescue, and it's available on Amazon, so available worldwide. We chose Amazon just to get that worldwide aspect, where I know there's various different things to think about along those lines as well, but I want to reach as many people as possible. And like I said, but first, if you're from a school, contact me and we can sort you out with free copies, because that education side of things is very important.
Excellent. All right. So Professor Michael Sweet, aka World Boss, thank you very much for taking a few minutes to chat.
My next guest is Paul Watkinson, an animal and especially dogs advocate. I suggested, well, we all love dogs in this country. Surely your work is pretty much done.
I absolutely adore animals, especially dogs, and especially a little breed called the King Charles Cavalier. But what I found out over the years through being part of rescue and my investigation has literally hurt me to the core through what I found. You know, dogs are being neglected in breeding puppy farms. Their horrendous cruelty that is going on. One particular dog that came to me called Maggie, she was used on a licensed puppy farm. She came into rescue and she was seen instantly by a vet. Maggie was found to have over 20 rotten teeth, facial paralysis, dry eye. She had a grade 6 heart murmur. She was in heart failure. She had a shoulder injury, likely from being kicked. And she had a thing called Chiara-like malformation, where the skull is too small for the brain, basically, and it causes immense pain every second of her life. She was given just 6 months to live, but that breeder was still using her to breed.
Okay.
And all her offspring would basically carry those hereditary defects. So unbeknownst to the public, they're actually buying into something that will cause immense suffering and pain, as well as financial cost.
We've got some serious problems of the like that you've just demonstrated. What's the plan? What are you going to do about it?
I'm running 3 campaigns at the moment. Over the years, like I said, I've undertaken many researches and studies, and not just by word of mouth. I've got papers from universities from around the world, Edinburgh being one of them. We have a dog bite epidemic in our country at the moment. You can read about it on the news, you hear it on the radio. Dogs are attacking people. Edinburgh University have stipulated dogs bred in low welfare conditions on puppy farms have a 70% more chance of being aggressive towards people and other dogs. Right. That's astounding. So I've started these 3 campaigns. Basically, one is to regulate rescues. Nature Watch Foundation, should I say, undertook a study into dogs and where they're coming from. In their research, they found 4 out of 5 dogs come from unknown origins. That's quite alarming.
Okay. So how many dogs are there in the UK? How many dogs is that? 4 out of 5?
There's estimated to be 13.5 million dogs within the UK. So 4 in every 5 dogs that you see walking down the street, we don't know where they're coming from. Now, they're coming from abroad. They're coming from underground breeders. They're coming from unlicensed puppy farms, and some are even coming from licensed puppy farms. Now, the problem we've got is the breeders have got very wise to the laws that we've got, and we've got some of the best laws in the world. Lucy's Law, the Animal Welfare Act. They really, really do crack down if you break these laws. But these criminal gangs, I have understood these laws and found ways around them. And you're getting rescues pop up all over the country. Rescue, look, come and adopt your pet from us, and we're doing the right thing. But what some of them actually are is part of this problem. They are part of the importation of illegal dogs. They are working with the puppy farmers to purchase their puppies, to take on.
So the petition that you want to get going, tell me how that's going to help and sort this out.
There's 3 petitions. I've got one where we want regulation on rescues, because there is no regulation on rescues at all at the moment. Yourself, myself, any member of the public.
I could set one up this afternoon if I wanted, could I?
Yes, absolutely. You could start up a dog rescue. You could go to a puppy farmer or someone who's doing this illegal trade, take on them dogs, and then plead to the general public for donations and say, look, please help me, these poor sick dogs. And whilst
what are you actually asking for on the petition?
I'm asking for regulation.
Right.
So, like we have regulation on licensed breeders, where these premises are inspected, they're audited, and they make sure to comply with the laws. I want full financial accountability for rescues because they're purchasing some of these dogs in. There's no accountability where the public funds are going, what they're being used for, or anything. So, that is just one part of the jigsaw puzzle. This is like a game of chess.
Yeah.
Like I said,
so Paul, you've got two other petitions that you're interested in going. First of all, just tell us a little bit about how the petition system works, because what you're going to do with all these petitions, how many signatures do you need, and what's the final result you're hoping for?
We need 10,000 signatures to get a government response, but it doesn't end there. We need 100,000 signatures on each of the petitions from the general public to force a government debate. If those petitions receive those signatures, then that will force them to discuss this within Westminster.
Okay.
And decide.
What are you hoping will come out of that?
I'm hoping these petitions will at least, at the very least, cause discussion, get them to realise what is happening, and then get DEFRA involved and actually bring in strict laws that will protect animals and their welfare.
Okay. Right. So you've mentioned the first petition, which is about animal rescue centres.
Yes.
What are the other two?
The next one is, at the moment, we have a microchip system that was introduced in 2016 for dogs. It's mandatory for all dogs to be microchipped, but there is no law, only guidance that if a dog is found lost or stolen, that it must be scanned. One example, which really highlights the case that a friend of mine has been working on for numerous years, is a little dog called Fern. That dog was stolen from the owner, I believe, in 2018. The dog was missing for 6 years. It was registered on the database as being stolen. The dog was never found. 6 years later, the dog was found in the street and taken to the vet, and that vet did scan it. That brought up instantly that the dog had been stolen, who the owner's details were, and they contacted the owners. Now, that dog had been bred from, it had surgery, and after 6 years, it was reunited. Now, that is appalling when you think we have a law that says they must be microchipped, but there is no law to scan them. So dogs remain lost and stolen. So my next petition is basically to call for a government centralised microchip plus DNA database, because there is no doubt that a dog cannot be identified through its DNA. It would be pretty impossible to say, let's DNA 13.5 million dogs, but we can ensure that every puppy born has a £20 DNA swab taken, matched to its identification chip. This will stop the importation of dogs. It will tell us exactly the whereabouts, where the breeders come from, who owns the dog, a full digital accountability.
And you set a price for that, £20. That seems like very good value, Paul.
Yeah, it's literally nothing. You know, obviously there's microchip costs that the breeders undertake anyway before they sell the puppies. But having that DNA bolted on, and we've got so many databases at the moment throughout the country. I think there's 16 or 20 databases, which are all privately owned and dogs are registered to. Now, those databases don't talk to each other. So your dog could be registered with any one of those and they don't talk to each other. My idea is that the government implement, like the National Health Database for dogs, a centralised one that all these databases point to. Okay. Now, within this database, it can be linked up to police, to vets, to breeders, to lost and found organisations. It can be linked up to rescues, HMRC, Border Force. And if a dog is lost or stolen or anything illegal is going on, it can flag up instantly to that right department, meaning reunification of dogs, instant prosecution because we've got a digital trail of evidence, and lost revenue for HMRC.
Okay, right. So that's petition number 2. So we had 2. You said there are 3. What's the third one?
The third one is close to my heart. Puppy farming. It's to ban puppy farming. Puppy farming can be anything from backstreet breeders that are not licensed. They can be large puppy farms, such as Northern Ireland, which have over 900 breeding bitches on, or some of the ones in Wales that have anywhere between 200 and 400 breeding bitches. Now, imagine these dogs, they're all caged in pens. They're not separated. We've got these dogs constantly barking all day. They live in their feces. They live in their urine. Some of them are not socialized. They're not cared for by vets. Most of the dogs that come from these places have the very minimum of dental problems. Now, you know what it's like to have a toothache. Now, imagine one of my dogs that came to me had 36 rotten teeth removed because it had dental problems from a puppy farm. That is just one instant. This inhumane industry must be stopped. We've got fantastic ethical breeders out there, a very small percentage, I must add, because there's a demand for 1 million puppies a year in the UK.
Yeah. So let me ask. So if members of the public want to buy a dog, 2 things really. How can they find out if where they're going is a good place to buy a dog from? You know, they look after their dogs properly and they obey the rules. And also, what questions can we ask from the person that's selling us the dog to try and ensure that, you know, things are being done properly?
There's the Kennel Club website, which will list all ethical breeders. They can go onto that and find a list of all the ethical breeders. But the problem we have is that we've got selling platforms like Facebook, even though they say it's against their rules and regulations, we're constantly seeing dogs and puppies being sold on there. We have Gumtree, we have Pets for Home. There's many selling platforms, and we live in a throwaway world where we want something and we want it now. So the public are seeing these ads, they're just going along and purchasing without doing any research. My advice would be do your research, because you are buying basically into a world of pain, not only for the dog, but for yourself, because the financial implications of the veterinary care that puppy will need throughout its life will literally break your bank.
Right. So make sure wherever you're buying a puppy from that they are registered with the Kennel Club. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And basically we have Lucy's Law now that Mark Abraham undertook, and that part of that law basically stipulates that the pups must be seen with the mother. Now, one of the flaws within that law is these illegal people are basically getting any bitch. They're renting houses. So you think you're going to see a loving family, a loving pup and dogs in a home. But what they're actually doing is they're importing these dogs in from farms or abroad, and they're going into homes. Now, they get a bitch that is not the mother. They put the puppies with that mother, and the public go and see them. Mm-hmm. And they think that, they think they're complying with Lucy's Law, but they're actually being deceived. Okay. All we can do is... That's the third. Sorry to interrupt, though. That's the third petition. Yes.
So you've got 3 petitions there. Now, Paul, if people are listening and would like to find the petitions so they can sign them or, look at them, read around the subject a little bit, where can they find these petitions? Presumably they're online somewhere.
Yeah, they're only on my social media at the moment, Facebook. So if they go onto Facebook and all they have to put in is hashtag Maggie's Law, they will find a whole heap of information, documentation, studies, and these petitions. They can sign, which will link them straight to the government websites, and sign those petitions. They must check their email once they've signed them, because they will get a notification from the government to confirm their signature.
Okay, right. So Maggie's Law, that's what they need to hunt for?
Yes.
Good. All right. So look, Paul, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to chat about this.
No, thank you so much for having me on the show, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much to my guests on this week's show, and they were Professor Michael Sweet, talking about the connection of sun cream and coral reefs, and animal advocate Paul Watkinson. And a special thank you to you for listening, and have a healthy week until next week.
Thanks for listening to the Relax Back UK show. Join me, Mike Dilk, again next week for more fascinating interviews and chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, please subscribe, like, and share it with your family and friends. And have a healthy week until next week.